Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. This is a bit of a reaction video. This is a video of record collecting, of music loving, of It's the Music, Stupid, and of buying records for investment. It's a bit of a ramble here, and it's a reaction video to two videos. There's been a recent auction. Those of you who watch my channel frequently, I'm sure, watch one of the two or both. Ken McAuliffe, the jazz writer, reviewer, music critic, and equipment reviewer, as well as Mike from the In-Groove, the retail record store, who is a record collector in his own right, as well as a retailer down in Phoenix. And what's interesting about this is I know that I'm going to be inconsistent in my presentation, my personal take. This is an opinion piece. It's really unfortunate I have to say it's an opinion piece, but it's just that. I know I will, in a way, debate myself through this discussion here, because it is an interesting discussion. It got me thinking, because I've always been on one side about It's the Music, Stupid, which I thoroughly believe that's the primary directive, if you will, and that's been my primary directive for almost 60 years in terms of collecting. That's the interesting buzzword that people either like or don't like. Am I collecting records, or am I buying records for the music? Well, I'm buying records for the music, but I have become a record collector, and is there an inconsistency in that? We'll see in this discussion, and it's going to be a bit rambling. And again, as I said, I might even debate myself as we go along. But let me tell you first, if you haven't seen those, there's two links below here. I advise you, if this discussion interests you on either side of the coin, or if you're in the middle, or in any one direction, listen to those. One is Ken McAuliffe. So let me start there, because Ken McAuliffe works one day a week on Saturdays at the Jazz Record Center in New York, in Manhattan. And they recently sold a supposedly original copy of Blue Train, John Coltrane's fantastic album, his only album as a leader on Blue Note Records. Now, these are not original copies, obviously. Otherwise, they would be on the chopping block possibly at this point in my life. But that record sold, that copy of the record sold for $12,600. Heads exploded. Some people were in awe. Some people thought, yeah, okay, go. That's something original, an original artwork. Now, one may say a record is not artwork, and we can debate that, and I'm going to get into that. And I think I'm going to use artwork as an analogy here, because that's something I know also a lot about. Now, there is a difference, obviously. But that record, some collector who had the means bought that record for $12,600. You can follow the story on Ken's. And then Mike In-Groove talks about that, how records are an investment. Some records are an investment. Collectibles are a real thing. And initially, on the surface, that seems obscene to me. On the surface, it seems, really, people are paying that much for a record? Is that going to ruin records for you and me and buying records? Well, you know, as much as I say it's about the music, which it is, I say, you know, if someone wants to pay that, that's the free market. Now, capitalism, whether you like it or not, that's what has happened here in America and around the world in terms of the collector's experience. Now, Mike talked about that in terms of the comic book world. And we know some people think that wrecked comics, destroyed comic books, because only in the last couple of years, Superman #1 as a comic sold for over $5 million, the first comic book to reach that. Now, you can go get a reprint of Superman 1 in a book, in a volume, in a collection. You can still enjoy it. You can buy this. Actually, you can't buy this one. We can, but this is the SRX, the Music Matters Jazz. This is fairly rare. This probably goes for several $100s alone right now. This was a $60 record or so when it came out, and maybe 70 even. SRX, Music Matters Jazz, and this is the Tone Poet, the double album with the mono and stereo. This is like a $50 record or whatever it is, 60, maybe it's 60 for the double, I don't remember now. But you can buy this. You can buy a $20 copy of Blue Train. You can buy a $20, $25 copy, so you can still get the music. So someone buying an original copy, and if you want to get in the weeds and understand which is original, again, watch both the Ken McAuliffe videos and the In-Groove videos. I don't want to start explaining over and repeating what they said about. Mike went on this whole discussion about how great records can be as an investment. Whether that's true or not, I'm not here to debate the truthiness of that. I'm here to debate or to present my take on that. Now, I have about 7,000 records, and many of which I bought in the day from the 60s to the 70s and the 80s. And my collection right now, as we speak on Discogs, I have 2/3 of my collection in Discogs, and the high price is $350,000. That's what my collection worth. Now, no way in hell am I going to be able to sell my record for $350,000. Mike, if you want it for that, come back the truck up and pick it up. They're all yours right now, this weekend. But that is what those records sold on the highest average there. And I realize that, and I'm not talking about that. I don't go looking in and care about the value of my collection. My collection increased organically over the years because I've had these records forever. Some records increased, some went down. I do want to talk about that in terms of the art world that I worked in, but I don't have any records close to $12,000 that are worth that. I don't have any records that are worth really $5,000. I was looking through my collection again, and I do have this record. This is one of 1,000 copies of the Residents record, their debut record, Meet the Residents. I was in San Francisco. We had this record in our store on consignment. 1,000 copies were pressed. The price here is $3.99. The sticker's still on it. It doesn't shrink. It has been opened and played, by the way. And this record now goes for $600 to $800. Now, that's quite the markup, but I didn't buy it for that investment. Over almost 50 years now, I've had this record, and it increased to $800 on the high end. Now, there's this record that's probably worth 20 bucks, 25 bucks. It's the same music. You can get the music. You can even stream the music for virtually free if you want to. So there is that option. So the idea of buying something as an investment, a record as an investment, in a way kind of does leave a bad taste in my mouth about that. There are things in my collection, again, the records have increased in value, but some are worth nothing, literally worth $1 or $2, but I like the music. So I am torn about this, about collectibles. Let's talk about something I know about also. Let's talk about photography. One of my photographers in 1986 or 87 photographed this cover. This is a sealed copy of Blue Note's Tony Williams' Angel Street. It's either 87 or 88. This is a beautiful cover. This is when Tony Williams came back, signed again with Blue Note, when he had his quintet of Billy Pierce, Wallace Roney, Mulgrew Miller, and Sharnett Moffett, and of course Tony on drums. This is after Tony studied composition, was writing. This is the more melodic sounds. He did about 6 or so records for Blue Note from 1985 to 1992, and then of course a few years later he passed away untimely, unfortunately. Now, this is a beautiful piece of art. This is a beautiful photograph by the photographer Michel Clement. This is double sandwiched Polaroid type 55 negative, the backing of a Polaroid, sandwiched together and printed in a dark room. This was not photoshopped. This was not digitally created. This is not an AI creation. This is an album beautifully designed by a designer by the name of Tom Bonaro. Now, I happen to have a bunch of prints of this. We have some 11 by 14 silver gelatin prints, and plus I have in my collection this 16 by 20, actually it's a 20 by 24 full print of the Angel Street photograph signed by Michelle Clement. This is a silver gelatin print. This is not a digital print. This print right now would probably sell for around $2,000. 11 by 14 would probably sell for around $800 to $1,000. Now, sure, you could generate digital copies. You could scan the negative, you could scan the print, and you could make what they call a glissé print. You've seen it before, that you can collect a glissé version of a photograph, which basically it's just a friggin' digital inkjet print. Now, it might be in a nice watercolor paper. Is that a collectible? I would say sure, to a point, but going back, this is called a vintage print. Now, let's talk about that print versus the record that sold, that first copy on Blue Note Records. The copy that sold for $12,600, I would say, is a vintage record, obviously. It's an obvious name for it because it came out in, 1957 or 58, whatever year that record came out. And that's vintage. There have been reproductions over the years in the 60s, 70s. This record pretty much stayed in print with all these different variations and formats of it. There are even gray market versions on the Dole label of Blue Train, and that does a lot of jazz issues in the European Union. But we could scan this and sell glissé copies and sell them for $100, $200, $300. People don't want to pay for artwork anymore. People don't see a value in artwork anymore, except those few who are collectors. The person that paid $12,600 for that Blue Train is a collector. That person apparently, obviously, sees the value in that record as a collectible, as a, not necessarily a one-off, but a very limited edition. There are very few that we know of in existence. Now, there may be some in people's garages, in their collections that have been tossed away, recycled, donated. Who knows where they are? But as time goes on, obviously, things in those days are few and far between, and they become collectibles. At the time, you didn't think of them as a collectible. When digital photography started really coming into its own into the 1990s, that late actually, you had Photoshop happen, you had digital photography happen, the darkrooms closed and people would work on their Macs and Photoshop and digitally manipulate prints. And most of the prints you see in galleries, a lot of them are digital pigment prints. Again, or as I said, glacé, you can call them whatever you want. But getting a vintage print printed either by the artist, by the photographer, in this case, Michelle Clement actually printed these herself. At the time of her existence, at the time of the creation of the image, those are considered vintage photographs. If you get a Jim Marshall picture, an Ansel Adams picture that was printed during his lifetime in the darkroom, in those cases, since that's when it was all analog, it was all darkroom printing with chemicals, those are considered vintage prints. And so a vintage print is going to be worth a lot more than if I print a 20 by 24 version of this in a digital artwork and sell it off for $300 or $400. You can see this now at the Blue Note site. Blue Note is selling photographs of Francis Wolff, and you can buy photograph, I think most of them are from $600 to $800. Now, they say they're darkroom prints, which I believe they are. They say they're from the negatives, which I believe they are, apparently. So it's the same thing of a digital mastered record versus cutting from the analog tapes. That's probably a good analogy. You can take an album and cut it from master tapes, or you can, quote, scan it or digitize it or do a DSD step or whatever the different formats, and you can cut it, you can do an analog cut after you do a digital step in there. I'm not going to get into that. You've heard that so many times, and people that are more knowledgeable and articulate about that will tell you that. But in the photography world, I know about that. So a vintage print done in a darkroom on with chemicals, like again, this print, this is sepia toned, various chemicals. Another, during this similar sessions around the same time, Michelle Clement did this print. Now this is a split tone or a selenium tone. It looks like sepia. It's different chemicals you use in the darkroom process. Again, this is a vintage print, printed in the late 1980s or around 1990. Now this is even rarer. This is 11 by 14. This is 1 of 1. Let's talk about editions now. The Coltrane SRX. This is when this SRX formula, Music Matters Jazz, did a limited edition. I think they did 1,000 of these, of the SRX, maybe even less, maybe 500. These are rare because of the edition. First of all, they're wonderfully mastered. They're Kevin Gray cut, all analog, Joe Harley. This is basically, this whole Music Matters Jazz is the template what Joe Harley worked on to create the Tone Poets for Blue Note Records. But because of not just the music, again, we want the music. I love the music. I didn't buy this for its scarcity. I bought it because I liked the music. I wanted a great sounding version of this. And I would argue that this SRX version or that Tone Poet sound better than that $12,600 Blue Note original copy. I guarantee it sounds better. Now, people like the vintage sound of it, but I guarantee you, or I shouldn't guarantee it too much, but that person who paid that much didn't buy the record to play. He bought it as an artifact, as a collector's item. And that is the debate that we have, collectors versus music listeners. Now, can we be both? I am a record collector, but I don't buy things simply because they're rare, but I do buy things that have become rare over time, some faster than others. And what was interesting, I thought, in Mike Ingrew's conversation, he talked about manufactured collectibles. What is a manufactured collectible? Well, let's take this for instance. Okay, this is a Beatles lunch pail. This probably cost $10 in 1964, if that. I don't remember. Someone look it up. Remember these? And that includes the thermos. Now, depending on when you look and where you are and who last bought, this goes for about $1,000 now. I'm sure you can get them less or more, depending where you are. $1,000 for a friggin' lunch pail. Because it was just sold as a mass market item that became vintage. Remember when you're at a certain age, when your parents gave away your Lionel train set? There's things we had and they got tossed. And so there are few left. You know, why is the Led Zeppelin RL so expensive? It goes for $800 or more in some cases, depending on condition. Well, and they printed millions of those, even at the beginning, or at least hundreds of thousands before they changed it. They printed a lot, but everyone played them. They didn't think about it. They were basically a commodity that you could just play and enjoy. And then maybe you got into CDs and you gave them away, or they got trashed because you stacked them as a party at parties for decades. And then the CD era came and you just kind of gave them to Goodwill or something. But the ones that come up in pristine condition, they were not manufactured to be rare, expensive records. Everyone ended up liking it. But talking about that $1,000 lunch pail, if you will, there was this a number of years ago. This is a Beatles Yellow Submarine ATM model. This came out maybe 15 years ago. It probably cost $15, $20, 15 years ago. It probably sells for $15, $20 now. This is a manufactured collectible. You know, all the stuff you see at the Beatle Fest sites and online are manufactured collectibles. At the beginning of this, I said something to the effect that I had a little bit of a love-hate of using the word record collector, but I am a record collector. I collect records. I like records, but I buy them because of the music. Very few records, except for some Beatle duplicates, do I keep sealed. In fact, I listen to everything except, if there's a cover variation, I'll buy that. But I'm buying those for the artwork, like talking about photography. Look back there. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I'll do a cutaway there. That is a Helmut Newton book by Tash. And Helmut Newton was a photographer, died about a decade ago. He took a lot of portraits, a lot of nudes, had a little kink to some of his work. And Taschen Books put out a limited edition called Sumo. These originally sold for $2,000 and included a stand, a table stand, metal, beautiful stand, designed by Philippe Starck, the designer, the architect, the interior designer. And one of my photographers had that, and she had it for about a decade on top of her little baby grand piano in her photo studio. And when she moved and I moved, she said, I want to give this to you as a gift. Now, it had been lying out. It had some spine damage, a little bit of a moisture damage, and for whatever reason, she can't find the stand. Now, if that was in perfect condition, if that had the stand, that book would be going between $10,000 and $20,000 now. Obviously, it's not. Would some collector wanted a damaged copy for several thousand? Maybe. I don't know, but I'm not here to sell it. My photographer gave it to me as a going away moving gift, and I cherish it. There is a smaller version. Again, there's a smaller version that Taschen you can buy for $50, has a little plastic stand. You can see the same photographs. You can enjoy the artwork of it. It's not that, quote, vintage edition of that. So there's room for both. The bottom line is there's room for both. So what am I trying to say here ultimately? I just wanted to react and just share my personal opinion that it's not so cut and dry. I don't believe that just because people are investing in records, that it's ruining record collecting. I think that's a bit of a over simplification of the situation. When someone pays a lot of money for any collectible, whether it's a comic book, a record, a book, George Harrison's I Me Mine, like 2,000 copies, 1,900 copies, 1980, signed. This was, I think, $250 when it came out. This goes for several thousand now. Genesis books. I didn't buy it for value. I bought it because I am a fan of the Beatles. I'm a fan of George Harrison. I wanted to read his autobiography. I like the art of a handmade piece. I mean, looks like a UHQR. So maybe I should go back on my feeling about the box sets for the UHQRs, which has this kind of old-timey vintage, there's that word again, spine. Go watch those videos. Buy and collect records because you enjoy the music. That's my opinion, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just like anyone in the comments in this video or on Ken's video or on Mike's video is going to say, no, you're wrong. It's wrecking the music business. It's wrecking music. It's not wrecking music because there are other options. You can still hear that music. If that collector's purchase of $12,600 said, because of that, you can't listen to Blue Train anymore, that would be something. But that's not the case. So just a little rant, just a little reaction. What do you think? Am I crazy? Don't answer that one. Thanks a lot for watching. Mazzy loves you.